Good morning. I'm David Hirsch, the president of the board this year. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist congregation. We are a religious community who commit ourselves to diversity. We hope to nourish human differences, those of gender, race, age, ability, sexual orientation, political views, culture, class, and religious belief. Welcome to all who treasure freedom of conscience in the search for truth. We promise to do our best to provide you a spiritual home. We extend a special welcome to our visitors today. We hope you follow our Facebook page. To participate in Zoom and receive announcements about special events and our religious exploration classes, please sign up for our weekly email. There should be a link in the comments section on our Facebook page where you can sign up. We are so glad that you joined us today.
Good morning. I'm the Reverend Julie Ann Lupp. It's wonderful to be with you in our summer services. Our opening words this morning are from Orlando Brugnelia. Here we find a house of welcoming. Here we find a vision of hope. Here be received as you truly are, unique and beautiful. Your journey acknowledged and your love honored. Let us rejoice together and be in this community of welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, everybody. I hope you can hear me. Hi, I'm Ken Adler, and I'm on the Social Responsibility Committee. And I'm here to talk with you about 3 different kinds of volunteer opportunities that are coming up for our congregation pretty soon. In order website, or when UU Connections comes out during the week by email, you can follow the links and sign up for them. The first one is the Beacon House, which is a family homeless shelter on Barstow Street near our congregation. At the Beacon House, we will be providing suppers for a week starting at the end of June and going into July. And all you need to do is to cook a supper for about 15 people and bring it there, or you can bring a side dish and drop it off about 5 o'clock in the evening. All the details are available on the website, and I hope that some of you can do that. The families that receive them are very appreciative. The second big event that's coming up is that the first 2 weekends of August, our congregation and our Social Responsibility Committee will be running the brat stand at Festival Foods on London Road. This is a labor-intensive labor of love, and we need people that are interested in doing some cooking, handling money, putting the brats into the buns and wrapping them up, those sorts of things. You don't need any training beforehand, and we do need a lot of people to help out with this. So please try to find it in your heart to help out with that. And the third thing is that we are trying to get ready to work with the Red Cross to sponsor a blood drive at our congregation, hopefully in September. In order to do that, the first step is to get 30 people to sign up to say that they're interested in giving blood. This doesn't mean that you're absolutely committed to doing it, but that you are interested. And once we have a list of 30 names, then the Red Cross will start working with us. So we've got 22 signed up. I hope we'll get some more. And as I said, you can sign up for all of these on our website or through UU Connections. If you are an astute observer, you've noticed a tinge of desperation in my voice. But don't worry, you can settle me down if you can sign up for these sorts of things. So thanks a lot for your interest.
We are people that light chalices, and we always start our service with lighting a candle. So if you have a candle or a chalice available, and I'm going to invite you to join me in lighting your chalice. And our words this morning are from Elizabeth Harding. And I really like how she says this. She says, we don't drink, we Unitarian Universalists don't drink from our chalice. And I just blew out my candle. I need to work on my light here. We're going to try one more time because light doesn't give up, right? This is Pride weekend, so. Let our light shine. There we go. We Unitarian Universalists don't drink from our chalice. Instead, we use it to hold the flame. The circle of the chalice helps keep the fire small. The flame doesn't blind us. It doesn't burn us. It gives us light so we can see all the different things in the universe, even the invisible ones, because the Unitarian Universalist flame is a light of learning. The flaming chalice is a symbol of learning and of love. It's our symbol, the symbol of Unitarian Universalism. And now it's the time in our service where we share our deepest joys and concerns. And I'm going to invite you to share any joys or concerns that you have in the Facebook chat, or if you're with us on Zoom in the Zoom chat. And I will read those aloud and share them in this caring community. Jessie Peterson asked me to share a candle for her mother-in-law who lost her husband. And we want to send them love to to Lori Peterson McCumber, who lost her husband. Light this candle. Also light a candle for Alan Jackson, our member who is still in hospice at the Classic, and we send him light and love. Ashley shares that her family dog, Annie, had a stroke. We're sending healing energy to her. Ken shares that today my family is gathering to scatter my mother's ashes. It's a bittersweet time. We hold the Adler family in light. Marcia shares that my daughter-in-law's mother is still holding on to life in Illinois. We wish her a peaceful transition. Make sure I didn't miss anything here. And Kathy Ryder shares, I'm adopting a dog from Puerto Rico on Saturday. That's wonderful, Kathy. Hope you have a wonderful addition to your home. And Johanna shares, my joy is for all the wonderful help from Reverend Julie and the other UU members moving me into my new apartment in Eau Claire. We are so glad you're back in Eau Claire, Johanna. Welcome. And Marcia says that she's joyful about giving away 55 handmade rainbow pens yesterday at Pride. And so that was a great addition to our Pride booth. I'm just gonna see if there's anything on Facebook. Okay, well, I'm gonna light this final candle for all the joys and concerns that are too tender to escape our hearts, and also to celebrate pride and people who can live their truth, be loved in a community like this and in Eau Claire, and lift it up as having dignity and worth. And finally, we close with our joys and concerns with these words. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
Good morning. I'm Kristen Gustavson, and my pronouns are she, her, and I am a psychologist here in Eau Claire. And since about 2008, I've had the honor of working with a number of transgender and gender diverse people as they process and explore and work through their journeys. And I have a couple of things I want to note before I do my little spiel here for a few minutes. First of all, I'm a cisgendered person. First definition we'll talk about, but cisgendered means that the gender they assigned me at birth, which was female because of the way I looked when I was born, is consistent, which is sort of where cisgendered comes from, consistent with the way I experience myself. Transgender would mean trans is sort of opposite. So that's kind of where those terms come from. But as a cisgendered person, I need to acknowledge that I have done lots of training. I have talked and worked with and lived and loved many people who are gender diverse, but that is not my lived experience. And I think that's really important, that I don't speak for anyone else's experience. What I'm going to talk about is sort of psychosocial information and share some insights that I've gleaned. But again, I don't want to speak for anybody's experience. The second is that I've done a ton of training. I've had lots of friends and family and clients who I've worked with. But I'm going to get some things wrong. I'm going to probably say some things that might rub people the wrong way, in part because language and our understanding of gender is constantly evolving. And therefore, I'm not sure anybody's an expert on it. I certainly wouldn't say that I'm an expert on it. I have done a lot of training, and actually have lots of resources that I would love to share with folks. So I will put those, I'm going to send them to Chris so that she can share them with anybody who wants them. But I just need to make sure I stay humble about the fact that, I'm going to share what I know, and things keep changing. And I guess I would encourage people to respectfully keep asking questions and keep learning about language and assumptions and everything else we're talking about today. So jumping in. In the most broad sense, gender is defined as a system of categorizing people based on things like mannerisms, appearance, and identity. And we attach meaning to these things, these categories. Some things that gender is not, it is not binary. So though sometimes we'd like things to be very discrete, yes, no, black, white, male, female, man, woman, gender is not that way. It's also not biological sex. Biological sex is related to our DNA. It's related to our genitalia. And it's also not sex assigned at birth. Oftentimes we just talk about assigned sex at this point. And that's really a legal thing more than anything else. So going the next level down, really gender has two parts: our gender identity and gender expression. Gender identity is a person's own internal sense of their self, and thinking about how that relates to gender categories of typically man, woman, but also both man and woman, or maybe neither. Again, this is not a binary either. It's not even a continuum. When I first started working with folks, we used to think it was a continuum. So if you were more one, you had to lose the other. But now we really think about it almost more like vectors. I'm hesitant to try to show you a handout because it's probably not going to come through very well. But very quickly, this is one of the wonderful things we sometimes use with folks, and lots of kids can get this pretty well. But even at the most basic level, if you think, you can see these are vectors. So you can be a little bit male and a little bit female, or a ton male and a ton female. It's, there's all kinds of constellations that gives us. We were joking about Star Trek, and I often think about this as kind of like the three-dimensional chess thing as opposed to a flat board. So things vary in lots of different continuum. But again, it's not one or the other, or more one, less one. One other thing that's important to think about too is that our gender identity is not stable necessarily. For some people, it might be. Some people pop out of the womb and feel very confident, but in what they are, and maybe it's in line with, maybe it's not in line with what they were assigned at birth. But for a lot of people, it varies. It varies over time. It could vary during the day. So we sometimes talk about things being fluid, especially during developmental stages like childhood and even adolescence. Things are very fluid in all kinds of directions. And gender identity may be one of those as well. Jumping to gender expression. So gender expression is the sort of the dovetail of that. It's not the opposite. When we talk about gender identity as an internalized thing, gender expression is more interactional with the world. So it's how I look, how I present, even the behaviors I do, or the jobs that I take, those things are laden with our cultural expectations of what it is to be female or what it is to be male. And there's a lot of judgment there. And there's a lot of change again, too. You know, if we think different cultures have very different norms, have very different understandings of things. Some of these things we get to choose. Maybe our haircuts can convey something that we want them to, or our clothing. Of course, a lot of kids and a lot of professionals, for example, don't have choices in the way they present themselves. So they have to maybe stick within a norm, what is expected. But sometimes we can choose, and sometimes we can change things. And I know David's going to talk much more about even medically helping people to change, for example, their voice. But that's, you know, one of the things I work with lots of people on is trying to make changes that feel comfortable for them so that they can live the life and be perceived the way they feel is appropriate and right for them, for their gender identity, their internalized sense of self. This is also not binary. This is also not on a continuum. It's all over the place. Lots of different combinations are possible. And it's also not necessarily consistent over time and place. Again, I think all of us have examples when, you know, even within the day, we may feel more feminine and sometimes more masculine. I'm realizing I'm already out of time, but I do want to jump to a couple of things that I think I would love to convey from this conversation going forward as people who are caring and concerned individuals and living the tenets of the UU world. Sort of how can we help people feel as affirmed as possible? And one would be continuing to learn and question ourselves. I'd love for you to think about what are the gender norms that you might have been told as a child. I remember I played hockey when I was 5, and I was the only girl playing hockey in the area for the first 5 years I played because it was the 70s. And I remember my mom was very supportive, but she also made it clear I had to make a deal with her basically that if I got to play hockey, I also had to wear dresses to school at least 3 times a week. So right there's that message. And she was incredibly supportive. And yet there was this sense that I could only be a tomboy so much. And even, you know, think about what the difference is there. Tomboys are in lots of places supported and valued. But if I had been a male wanting to do female type things, it wouldn't have gone as well in the 70s. So, you know, I think that's a wonderful thing for us to really dig into personally, is really investigate and explore the messages we have learned and the messages we continue to convey to people. The other thing I would really encourage all of us to do with kids, but also with adults, is to really create validating and affirming spaces for all of us to explore our true selves. And those true selves need to be free from gender-laden expectations and assumptions, and certainly from correction. So that's my plug. I hope you have a wonderful day and enjoy the slightly cooler weather, at least for the next couple hours. Thanks.
Hi. So if I want to start with, I mean, I thought that Kristen's introduction in terms of, neither am I an expert. I am a cisgendered male, so I'm also an ally. And I also want to apologize because I think there's a sense among people in the medical world, especially physicians, to medicalize everything. I mean, there's an old saying that goes, to a cardiologist, everything's a heart problem. And so we tend to see some things, it's a matter of perspective. We tend to see things from like a research and you have to prove it kind of point of view. So just fair warning. But I want to talk about a couple of things. One is, and obviously sex and gender are not the same thing, but they are tightly interrelated. And I thought it might be interesting to talk a little bit about the biology of sex, because there probably is there certainly is a lot of influence on gender from one's sex, meaning the way that the body develops both in utero as a fetus before birth, and then again, the next big change is during puberty. And the other thing I wanted to briefly talk about was what I do in my clinic for gender dysphoria, which is defined as having distress in your life because of a gender gender identity that is not aligned with one's body or the way that the world sees you. So just quickly on terms of sex, the sex of an individual, that is whether they are born male or female, or somewhere in between, because that's a really important thing to note. It's not just in terms of gender that there is a continuum, but it also is in terms of the actual sex, because of changes and differences in how people develop. So the sex, the chromosome, is carried by the sperm, and there is you always get an X chromosome from your mother. From your father, you get either a Y chromosome or another X chromosome. The X chromosome actually has a lot more information on it, which some researchers think might speak to why people with two X chromosomes, there may be some changes in the brain, maybe some, there's actually more information than there is on the Y chromosome. But the Y chromosome has an area on it called the SRI region. Now I'm looking for my document. Okay, here we are. Okay. So if you have an X and a Y, the presence of the Y chromosome causes you to produce a testis rather than an ovary, or two testes rather than two ovaries. And this happens at about 6 to 8 weeks after conception. So very, very early on. And if you produce a testis rather than an ovary, that testis produces testosterone. And testosterone has the effect of causing one of the two systems that are present, the sort of the genital systems that are present before the 6 to 8 week stretch, called the mesonephric system. And actually the mesonephric system is what later on develops into the penis, the scrotum, so on and so forth. But interestingly, any androgen can do this. So if for whatever reason, a embryo or an early pregnancy is exposed to any kind of a testosterone-like material, they will develop some of this mesonephric system. And interesting also, there are genetic changes that mean that embryo doesn't really respond to testosterone. It doesn't have the proper receptor for testosterone, or doesn't make testosterone that has the normal shape. And so basically those because the generic human being is female, unless they're exposed to testosterone, typically those people will develop female sexual expression. So phenotype, really. So genotype is the genes, phenotype is the body that comes out of it. And then the ovary produces anti-Müllerian hormone, and that sort of shuts down the mesonephric system and causes the paramesonephric system, which develops into fallopian tubes, uterus, the top third of vagina, so on and so forth. So there are a lot of, again, there's most of the time it kind of goes most of the way to one of those two poles, male or female, but it very often does not. And so that potentially can contribute to issues with gender later on. There are other genetic issues, like, for example, when you have one X chromosome and no other chromosome, that's called Turner syndrome. There are problems with the adrenal glands where cortisol can't be made properly, and that causes high levels of testosterone to be present in utero. And then those folks also get masculinization, so a more masculine body at the time of birth. And that's actually called intersex. When you have, it's not clear at the time of birth, or it's not, I mean, no, is that ever really clear? But babies are typically assigned male or female, but there are a lot of babies who, they say at least 1 in 1,000, who cannot really be and should not be assigned a gender or a sex at birth. The second big time for hormonal changes is at puberty. And I think that's an important place to think about. Should we be thinking about gender at puberty and trying to determine if what's about to happen, with either under the influence of the testis or under the influence of the ovary, whether those things are the proper or the correct development for a person's gender identity, because they're going to get gender expression out of those genetic and phenotypic traits at puberty. And so this is something that I'm very inexpert at, but gender in childhood prior to puberty is another complicated topic. And I think you actually get better results in terms of treating gender dysphoria if you start prior to puberty, because you can block the hormones that would, for example, cause a child to develop breasts, or cause a child to develop a prostate and a larger penis. So, but where I usually come in, my patients are all either adults or late adolescents. They've already gone through puberty, and It's a lot less complicated in terms of the treatment plan for gender dysphoria. And again, gender dysphoria is discomfort or distress caused in your life by not being in the right body, basically, not being in the body that your brain perceives that you should be in. And it's pretty straightforward, actually. We talk about the risks. I make a diagnosis, or somebody comes to me with the diagnosis of gender dysphoria, and then we talk about how to treat it. And I like to tell people who are worried about changes, especially I find for, a lot of times it'll be younger people coming with their parents, and their parents are really worried about, it's kind of vague worries, but I think they're worried about losing their child or having a lot of risks. And I really talk about it as just a nudge. We're giving the body a nudge, because really the differences between the phenotypic, typical female body and male body are quite small. I mean, almost everything is the same. There's only a few differences. And I can pretty easily help people to be nudged in those directions. So for example, if a person comes in and we're assigned female at birth, but now has a gender identity that is more either male, like binary male, or a more non-binary transmasculine, we call it, it tends to be called. So all I really need to do for that person is provide testosterone. The best way to do that is with an injection, typically weekly. And the results start to show up pretty quickly and maximize after 1 to 2 years. In both directions, often people will go on to have some kind of a surgery to correct things that, or to make it more in line, things that are not dealt with by hormones. I don't do those surgeries, although I do take uteruses out when people have unwanted bleeding. That can be very helpful for them. In the other direction, when somebody comes in assigned male at birth and is now feels that they're a binary female or a non-binary trans feminine person, in that case, you have to suppress testosterone. It turns out the testes they just don't give up very easily. So we have to do things to suppress the testosterone secretion and then also add estrogen back in. There are lots of other things aside from surgery that people might want to investigate. For example, voice changes. You can't get rid of the voice change that happens at puberty for somebody with testes. But you can help train the voice. I send people to speech language pathologists who can help a person to speak higher and to speak with an elevated tone and have it sound normal. Obviously, people can dress differently. That's an important part of the treatment plan, is to change your affect, what you wear, how you approach the world, how you appear to the world. There are surgeries available for the face and the Adam's apple. So all kinds of procedural sort of stuff. And, we talk about the risks. Honestly, you kind of go from the typical medical risks of one gender, for example, heart attacks for men, we think about, and breast cancer for women. If you treat long enough, you actually develop the risks of the gender or the sex rather, that I'm treating you into. So, you for example, if I treat a transgender woman with estrogen long enough and she develops breast tissue, then she has to worry about breast cancer and has to have mammograms done. It's just as an example. I also worry a little bit about fertility. It's probably the case that mostly when you stop hormones, if you still have the testis or the ovary, that you can still produce sperm or egg, but it's not necessarily the case. And so there are options, for example, for freezing these things in case you want to become a parent later on after your change. And that's, I guess, about all I have to say. I want to introduce a friend of mine, Benny, who I know actually first met in the theater community. He's a performer, as have I sort of half-assedly been on stage, and also then later became my patient. So we worked together in the clinic to achieve his goals in terms of as a transgender person. So Benny, take it away.
Hello, I had to unmute. Hi, I'm Benny. As Dr. Hirsch said, well, David, I suppose you all know him as, and that's how I met him, but I call him Dr. Hirsch now, said he is my, my transition doctor. I want to go through a couple of things. So Kristen and David both were talking about assigned female at birth, assigned male at birth. In the community, we say AFAB and AMAB because there's a lot of words that we have to remember, a lot of terms, a lot of acronyms that everybody has to remember, so we shorten it. So I am considered AFAB. I was assigned female at birth. And Dr. Hirsch has been helping me with my transition. I am mid-transition right now. I started hormones exactly a year ago yesterday, so it's kind of like a birthday for me. And I'm looking into other ways to medically transition. There are people in the community that will never medically transition either for health reasons or they choose not to because they don't feel it's necessary. And they are still completely valid. They are still recognized in the community as the gender that they present. I present mostly male, but there are times where even now my feminine side comes out. So I'm not completely binary male, and that's okay. I am raising 3 kids. I have twins who just graduated high school. One of them is gender fluid. And I also have a 4-year-old little boy. And I say that he's a boy because I ask him all the time, are you a boy? And he says, I'm a boy. So and it's a game we play kind of, but it's so that I'm not missing anything with any of my kids. So I guess the other thing that I just really want to talk about is when you're out in the community and you're not sure of somebody's gender, we're trying to make it very, what's the word I'm looking for? Very normal to say, what are your pronouns? And it's not preferred pronouns now. And I know that things are changing rapidly. Right now, what we're saying is, what are your pronouns? Make that so normal. Or when you're introducing yourself, hi, I'm Benny. My pronouns are he, him. And then there's no guessing. It's just really validating for people that are in the community when somebody tries to even do that. They ask for pronouns or they introduce themselves and they give you their pronouns. It opens up that conversation to say that your pronouns are this. I can't speak enough for the community that we have here in Eau Claire, because I know a lot of places don't have the community that we have, but and I also want to thank you all for even being open, because this is the only church I've ever known that wants to know about these kinds of things and that wants to learn, and they sought me out. They sought anybody out. I've spoken at a couple of the OWL meetings based on gender and sexuality and things like that. And that has just been amazing for us. So thank you for all of that. But if you have any questions, I am very much an advocacy and education person. I feel like the more you're educated, the less you're afraid. So I'm open to pretty much anything. And if I don't know the answer, I will help you find it. And so thank you very much for having me, and I'm open to questions.
I want to thank Kristen, David, and Benny for sharing. If you are joining us in Zoom, when we are done with the service, there will be time for some question and answers, and in a more anonymous format, not streaming to Facebook. So we're just so lucky to have people who will share their truth and also allies in this community. And I am Reverend Julianne Lepp. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And it's such a learning to start meetings like that. And who teaches me that is not only Benny today reminding me, and Kristen reminding me, is the youth often start their stuff. Hi, I'm so-and-so. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. And it's amazing how if we listen and if we respect each other, we can move into these spaces respectfully. So thank you so much. And now we're going to move into our time of giving. And we have a special presentation from our 50-50 Share the Plate recipient, the Prairie Enthusiast. And so we'll share that with you now.
Greetings. I'm Kathy Stahl from the Chippewa Savannas chapter of the Prairie Enthusiast. On behalf of our chapter, I want to thank all of you of the Unitarian congregation for your donation to our work to protect native prairie and savanna remnants. As a part of our mission to save those few remaining native remnants, our chapter has been working in the town of Seymour, just outside of Eau Claire, where we are attempting to protect and expand the native vegetation. At the same time, we're hoping that we'll be able to get the endangered Karner blue butterflies to return to that site. Just west of the village of Colfax, we've been working to preserve and expand the native prairies at Dobbs Landing. That effort has included prescribed burns, invasive control, seed collection, and seed broadcasting. We operate as a totally volunteer effort, and so your contributions to our chapter will be applied to the projects I just identified. In addition to using seeds we collect, we purchase native seeds to expand the prairie areas and to add native species that may have disappeared over time. As you probably know, native seeds are labor-intensive to grow and collect, and therefore expensive to purchase. You can be assured we appreciate every dollar of your donation that will go toward purchasing seeds. Thank you so much for thinking of us and for your protection of our few remaining native remnants. We welcome your questions, and we hope that you'll come out to see our projects. Thanks again.
So the month of June is our 50-50 Share the Plate with Prairie Enthusiast. And with gratitude for the abundance in our lives, we give to help people in need and support the work of this congregation. You can donate online at uueauclair.com, or I'm gonna hold up my phone because I can be a cool little person saying you can text to give at 84321. Our music for giving today is with Kristen Gustavson and Jim Phillips. The offering will now be given and gratefully received.
We are going, heaven knows where we are going. We know within, and we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there. We know we will. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there. We know we will. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. We are going, heaven knows where we are going. We know within, and we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there. We know we will. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there. We know we will. Oh yeah, yeah. 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 Oh yeah, yeah.
Thank you so much for that. Well, yeah, we're figuring out where we're going. Now is the time in our service where we will be extinguishing our chalice, And but we always remember that the light continues on. So you can join me at home. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Thank you so much to everybody who has done our service today. And we hope that you can join us in Zoom for questions and conversation. Our closing words today are from Barbara Hamilton Hallway. Go now in peace, deeply regard each other, truly listen to each other. Speak what each of you must speak. Be ready in any moment to disarm your own heart, and always live in a realm of love that has begun. So be it, and blessed be. For those of you watching in our Facebook live stream, I'm so glad that you joined us today. If you'd like to get more information on how to join services in Zoom, you can fill out a visitor link, and that was in the Facebook comments. And we'll take a brief moment after we close the service here in Zoom to share joys and concerns. And then we'll have a question and answer session and coffee and conversation. Go now in peace and go in love. Thank you for joining us today.